Hello, hello, welcome. First of all, I want to say thank you for showing up. Your time is very valuable to me, and I appreciate you for coming on and doing this for yourself. My name is Claudia Chan. I am a mindset life coach. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I had a book launch yesterday, and it's called Asian Women Trailblazers Who Boss Up. And I'm really proud that we became number one international bestsellers on Amazon. And the one thing that really came up for me was dealing with my people pleasing tendencies. So, what I did, just to share a little bit with you, was that I actually went on my phone and I went to contact every single contact on my phone. I reached out to each person individually to say, hey, I have a book coming out. Could you support me? And this in itself brought up so much of my own people pleasing tendencies because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? They will think that I'm bragging. Who am I to have this book? So there's a lot of all those things that were happening, and there were so much emotion that went through my brain yesterday. And that was definitely one of the biggest struggles I had to overcome. And I know for a lot of people, when these thoughts come up, and these are the thoughts that are going to stop them from moving forward, right? So I know this because that was me. And that's why today we are going to talk about how to stop people pleasing and show up as yourself. So I'm just going to share the screen. Okay, so we're going to, sorry, I just doing having some technical difficulties. So we're going to share the screen to share with you what our agenda is about today. We're going to talk about what is people pleasing, how does people pleasing tendency develop, how does it impact our lives, how to feel in control of your decision, and have the courage to show up as yourself. And so let's start off with some examples. I'd like you to think back to your life as you're listening to these examples and see if any of them resonate with you or remind you of your own experiences. So, example one. I was taking the train home, and the man sitting next to me started having a conversation with me. I don't want to talk to him, but I feel kind of rude if I stop. Example two. I had the whole day planned out. Then my mom asked me to do something urgent, quote unquote, for her. I end up having to scramble through the day to get everything done. Example three. I was having a conversation with someone from a networking event. We started talking about a topic where he disagreed with my point of view, and I ended up just smiling and nodding. Example four. I had a friend recently who offered French tickets and seemed to not understand that I had to eat. I felt guilty that she gave me a ticket and I felt I owed her for the ticket. I feel it was in my right to take time to eat and then decide whether I wish to go to the theater. So now let me ask you, how many of these examples did you find resonance in them? And can you think of any recent examples that you have encountered in your life where you were doing something similar to this, or people pleasing? So let's go ahead and define what is people pleasing. In my own words, people pleasing is when we change how we normally act and go against ourselves to make the other person feel good and love us, which comes at the expense of our own comfort, right? So if you were to let's explore all those four examples a little bit. For the first example, for the train ride home and the man start talking to us, I am uncomfortable to talk, but I don't want the man to feel disrespected, so I continue talking, right? For number two example, which is my mom make, making a urgent request. It is, I am stressed out, but I don't want my mom to feel disappointed. Okay. And number three, which is the one that is at the networking events, and the person that I'm talking to disagree with my point of view. And right at the moment, I'm not feeling in alignment with my own value, but I don't want the man to dislike me. So I just kept nodding and smiling, right? Example number four about the French tickets that the friend had given the person. I'm not respecting my body, right? Because if I forego the eating, I'm not respecting my body, but I don't want my friend to feel taken advantage of, right? So we're going against ourselves to try to make the other person feel good. So in a way, they'll love us. So in a way, we're actually manipulating them to to show us their love or approval. All right, so now that we kind of know what people pleasing tendency is, we're going to talk about how does people pleasing develop. Okay. So this actually started way back when we were young kids. How our parents interacted with us shapes us into how we interact with them and eventually how we interact with other people. Now, most parents want the best for the kids, but they sometimes deliver the message poorly, executed poorly, and it can have great impacts on their kids' lives. So let's look at a few examples, right? So maybe the parent may physically hit the child, they may verbally put them down or shame the child, they may ignore the child or give them the silent treatment, right? All of these to a child, it's telling them that it's kind of like a sign that says that means they're not loved. So as children, who is unable to discern what is really happening at this point, they will end up changing how they behave to make their parents love them again, to gain that approval back, right? So, like, I could see it in my son. My son, right now, he's 5 years old. And it even happened a few years ago as I was watching him. Whenever we would tell him to do something, he would start crying, having a tantrum. But after he had processed the feeling, he would usually go along with what we say. Even if he's mad, even if he is reluctant, he'll be like, "Fine, I'll do it." Right? So he's changing his behavior to appease us. And so these are some of the things that the kids may do, right? They may remain silent and not speak up even when they disagree with what we're saying, right? And if they have been physically hurt, sometimes if they have to speak up, they will spend a lot of the time trying to figure out how to best say something so that it doesn't trigger the parent to hurt them, right? Or they don't want to cause any conflict because of the possibility of getting hurt or rejected. And they could sometimes feel guilty when they have to say no because if they have been shamed for being not a good daughter or good son, so then they may feel like they're not a good enough friend or wife or husband. So this is how the pre-program happens, which is in the very early stage of development. Okay, and here's some of the impacts, right? As a child, those are the things that we used to do, but now that as we're adults, there is an impact that happens to us. So the very first one is that we may feel that we're actually out of control because we feel like things are happening to us. And what that means is we feel like we're at the mercy of other people. For example, let's go back to the train ride, right? When the man started talking to me and I couldn't say no, then I feel like my time has been taken away by that man, right? The impact is I feel like that person has control over my life. And so eventually we feel disempowered. And number two, the impact is that we actually don't really fully know who we are, right? So for people who tend to people please, they like to look outside into the external environment to see how people are always reacting to them. So we're always gauging how other people will what they will say, what they'll do, and then we change um, our way of interaction with them. So so let's talk about the example of the mom asking for help, right? So if let's say the mom is making a last request for us and a last minute request from us, and then what happened was we know we are so agitated or we feel really a lot of negative emotions, but we don't actually know exactly what we want. We just know that mom is always this way and she's always controlling us. And so what happens is our body actually know that we don't like this happening to us, but we actually never know what we want for ourselves. So we we can't even say what we want because we had never looked inward to spend time within ourselves to say, hey, I don't like this situation. What is it that I can do for myself? That was never a question that we spend time in finding out. So it's very important for us to actually know what we want. And that was the second impact is we don't know what we want. And the third one is that we actually feel quite alone, right? Because if let's say we have a people pleasing tendency, if we're to first meet friends, we would always try to extend ourselves to be someone who we're not, right? To make sure that the other person likes us. So let's give you an example, right? Let's say your mom has always asked you for help and she has always praised you for being very helpful. She's very nice, like she's very a good girl, always taking care of the household, right? And the more she praises you, the more you take that on as an identity. So when you go out to meet people, your first instinct is to give yourself to them. Be very generous to that new friend, always helping them. And then when they start to like you and become friends, then what happens is as keeps going on, you feel out of alignment with who you are. Right. So at some point, you may feel like your friend doesn't appreciate your help, or you may feel like they're taking advantage of you, and so you start becoming very resentful. Okay, and when you try to talk to them about it, they may become very confused, and they're like, but that's how you've always been. So then what happens is they feel like you have changed. And so the more you talk about it, the connection is not there anymore. So then you have a falling out. And then you feel like your friend doesn't understand you, feel very alone, and you feel very hurt. Okay, so that's the third impact where you feel very much alone and disconnected from others. So, how can we actually feel more in control of ourselves so that we can go ahead and be ourselves? So, the very first step is to take responsibility. It is time to realize that we have to stop blaming other people for taking advantage of us. Here's the truth: no one is responsible for our feelings. We're not responsible for other people's feelings, and we cannot change how other people act. So we have to see that because of how we were brought up, our brain have been pre-programmed this way. So we have to say, hey, let's take back that responsibility to become more aware of this so that we can start taking our power back. Now, I do want to talk about taking responsibility because a lot of people don't actually like the term taking responsibility because they equate it to taking the blame. Right? We're so used to blaming culture. It's like, who did this? Who's responsible for this? So we feel like if we're to take responsibility, that means we had done something wrong. But the truth is, when we talk about taking responsibility, we're actually getting very curious to know ourselves more. We cannot change the past. We acknowledge that we cannot change the past because the past had kind of defined us as who we are right now. But we have the responsibility and we have the capability to change, to rewire our brain so that we can have change the way the future comes, right? So that is the first step, is to be honest with ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves. The second step is to identify the fear, right? So when we always talk about people pleasing, at the core of it is that we feel that we're going to lose love or approval in some way or form, and it's caused by fear. So if we're to think back to the three ways that the parent might have treated the child, like if the child had ever hit the, if the parent had ever hit the child, right? The child may be scared of getting physically hurt. If the parent had shamed the child, right, the child is scared of being judged. Or if the parent had ignored the child, then the child is scared of being rejected, right? So these three fears, if we can identify which of these fears you're experiencing or you're afraid of, then you'll be able to pinpoint the reason why you people please. So for example, right, so the best question, let's go back to a little bit. So the best question that we can ask ourselves is this: what exactly am I scared of if I say no and stand up for myself? Or if you reword it, it's like, what am I afraid would happen if I don't do this? So let's talk about the train ride, right? If I stand up to the man to say, hey, thank you very much for talking to me, but I'll rather relax in my seat or I'll rather read my book, right? If I'm to say that, and we ask ourselves this question: what exactly am I scared of if I tell the man this? I don't want to talk to you anymore. I just want some time for myself. So, how are you going to answer that question? So, for me, I'm scared that he's going to think I'm rude. And the moment I believe that he thinks that I'm rude, then this is a fear of judgment, right? Fear of judging, of being judged by the other person. Okay, so let's talk about the example with the friend giving us the fringe tickets. What exactly am I afraid would happen if I tell my friend that I really need to eat first before the movie? So my response may be, well, I'm afraid that she will think I'm not such a nice friend to be with, and she won't want to invite me to another events anymore. Now, this is a combination of fear of judgment, right? Because I believe that my friend may think that I'm not nice, and a fear of rejection because I'm afraid that she's not going to invite me to another event, right? So understanding that it is the deep-seated fear that is driving you to act this way so that you people please is going to make you start understanding why you're doing certain things, right? So the first thing is to become aware, take responsibility to become aware, and then this is the awareness piece. So after identifying the fear, then we want to find out what exactly it is that we really want and why, right? So as I mentioned before, if you've been doing a lot of people pleasing, you may be looking outward and you don't actually know what you want. So let's give ourselves this time to reflect so that we can get a clear picture of who we are so we can make better decisions, right? So one of the questions that you can ask yourself is that what is it do I exactly want in the situation? And why do I want it that way? So let's give an example. For the networking events, right? What exactly do I want? When I come across the person who has a disagreement with me, I know I felt triggered, right? But what I really want when I'm in a networking event is the fact that I want to remain open so that I get to know other people's point of view. Right? So that we now know this is what we want, even though it was triggering and we feel like we want to say something back to that person. But right now, it's just to realize that what I really want at a networking event is the fact that I just want to get to know people. right? And why is that important to us? Because the truth is, there's really no harm being done. I'm just there to get to know people, and I know that there will be people who will agree with me. There will be people who will be in disagreement with me, so that there will be a lot of people. And after I meet them, I can decide whether I want to continue connecting with them or not, right? So there really is no harm done, and I feel good with this decision. Or let's do another example, right? So, for example, if let's say my mom is always making last requests to ask me to do things, what exactly do I want? I want to stick to my schedule and set up firmer boundaries with my mom, so that if she makes a last minute request, like within 48 hours, I want to be able to stand up to say no to her. Okay, so that's what I want. And why is this important? Because I want to take this time to honor me and my wishes. So what happens is the next time when she makes her request within the 48 hours, I'll be saying, "Hey mom, I love you, but I'm really sorry. I won't be able to do this for you until at a later time." Right? So getting to know your why, like what and your why is going to help you make future decisions for yourself at a place that it feels good to you. And when you're figuring out your wants, here's something I really want to share with you. When you're trying to figure out what you want, sometimes it may feel very difficult to even admit to it. Right. So for me, like there were a few times that my friends were inviting me to parties and I don't want to go. And it was really difficult for me to even admit that I don't want to go, because I make it mean like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad friend. They're inviting me and I don't want to hang out with them. They may think that I'm very inconsiderate and they may not want to invite me anymore. And so we have all of these stories that gets attached to it. But be very honest with yourself, is what is it that you really want? You may be struggling to say the what, because we were never given that opportunity to say, hey, what do you want? Like we are always afraid of how other people are going to respond to us. We never acknowledge what we want. So it could be a very difficult step to admit to it, be honest and admit to it, right? And also sometimes in terms of the why, I do also want to say that sometimes the why can be just as simple as I don't want to, right? Find out your why and feel very good for the decision that like you really like your why, because sometimes it could just be, yeah, you know what, I've been so busy, I just want to relax, and I just don't want to go out to this events, and it's okay. And the third thing I want to tell you, which I don't have it here, is the fact that even though you have decided on your what and your why, it's just a guidance. So each time it happens, when you have to make a decision, you may not be sticking to this what and the why. You may still go back to your old ways. And I want you to be clear that it's okay. Okay. So I will talk about this a little bit more in the next step, which is show up courageously. Hey, why show up courageously? Because as people pleasers, when we want to say no, it's hard, right? Because if it's easy for you to say no, you wouldn't be here. You would be doing it already, right? So courage is needed in this step, because courage is really the strength that you have to tap within yourself, knowing that you are scared, you know it's not feeling good. So courage is an excellent emotion to have, but it does not always feel good. Okay, because remember, there is a lot of fear surrounding all of these, like fear of getting hurt, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, right? So we want to be able to tap into that, to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead with it anyways. So, one question you may want to ask yourself is, am I willing to be uncomfortable for a few minutes to stand up for myself and say no? Or do I want to be uncomfortable for hours and resenting the fact that I said yes and I'm somehow have to get stuck doing this thing I didn't want to, right? So there will be discomfort in both of these decisions. So which discomfort do you want? Do you choose at the moment? Right. And I just want to touch back onto the previous point I was talking about earlier, right? So if let's say, for example, if it's a day for you that your cup is full and you feel very loving, you are well rested, and your day is beautiful. So what happens is maybe if let's say your mom has asked you to do something for her last minute, right? So you may actually feel like, you know what, I really want to help my mom out, even though I know that she's making a last minute request. I'm going to help her out anyways, right? So knowing that you're making the decision because of what you want right now and you feel good about it, versus if let's say you've been stressed out and you have a lot of things to deal with and your mom makes you this request, right? And then you say, no mom, I cannot do it, I really want my time to do my own things and I'll help you when I get a chance, right? So that knowing that this the what's and the why will guide you toward your next decision. So I don't want you to be stuck saying that, oh, I've made this decision of my what and the why and I can't stick to it, right? So I don't want you to beat yourself up against this. It's a very fluid thing. So it can change any day, right? So, but the main question is, are you willing to sacrifice who you are to appease the other person, or do you want to stand up for yourself? Right? Because at the end of the day, people pleasing is that you are abandoning yourself, you're not standing up for yourself. And so when we're trying to work through this, you're actually getting back to the core of who you are, being true to yourself. And that's what we're trying to do here. Okay. So, in summary, people pleasing is just when we change how we're normally acting to go against ourselves so that we can make the other person feel good and make the other person send us love and approval. And we actually don't feel very good when it happens. So it is a tendency that we have developed when we were kids. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, something's wrong with me. It's just something that we had developed throughout our lifetime as we interacted with our parents. And so but this had have big impacts in our life, right? Because it makes us feel disempowered. We don't actually really know who we are. We feel very disconnected and alone. So how do we stop people pleasing? Is that first thing is we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We want to identify which fear we are facing. And we also want to find out what it is that we want and why do we want it so that we can show up courageously, understanding that it is an inner strength that we want to bring out of ourselves, knowing that we feel very uncomfortable, we feel very scared, but we still take this action accordingly. And most of all, I want to say give yourself grace and lots of compassion as you're going through this process, because I'm not sure how old you are, but I'm 42 years old. I've been dealing with this for 40 some odd years, right? So it's not something that can be unlearned overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It will take time. But the more you understand yourself, the more you love yourself, then you'll be able to stop. And the more you practice, then you'll be able to stop people pleasing. So that's all for today's session. I'm really happy to offer you this session. Um, if you're interested if after you have done this session and if you're interested to see how coaching can help you, I would love for you to hop on a 30-minute coaching session with me. It's a free session where I'm just there to help you to go through some of the things so I can make you aware, so you can see what coaching is about. And that's it from me. And if you have any questions from this presentation, I'd love for you to send me questions and ask me anything. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you next time.